Comparing the 3 different watch straps I have used for my Garmin 7, Fenix 7S Pro, also the 6S Pro before, and also my Galaxy Watch. So first of all, these have the same width, which is 20mm. I have the 42mm version of the Galaxy Watch 4, and also the smaller version, I think it is 43mm in terms of the diameter of both the 7S Pro and also previously the 6S Pro, which I still have. So first of all, the original strap that came with each the Garmin devices were, I think, not that useful. First of all, I think they don't look that great. Also, they are a little bit lighter compared to this one, and also I did not get that good sleep recordings. So I eventually decided to try this strap, which then eventually worked. So I have 2 of these straps because I had one Galaxy Watch stolen, and so I still had the strap because I had it on another strap. So I have 2 of these straps, which I then used on the Garmin device as well as the Galaxy Watch, which I have used for most of the time. So the big upside to this is that it is quite a secure strap, so it is made out of rubber or some rubbery material. And then it also has this feature where it basically loops around, and then as you then click it in, the rest of the band then goes under, which is also somewhat irritating because you have to stick it basically under, and then this rubs against your skin, but this is then what it looks like on the outside. This over time usually then degrades as you bump towards or bump into other things. Now this would be the first strap, and I did get somewhat reasonable sleep recordings on the Garmin as well as the Galaxy Watch with this strap, and this is the original Galaxy strap. I also did get the same strap, at least seemingly, on AliExpress, which was way cheaper compared to the original strap, but I found that this is way more rubbery, and it is also lighter and narrower, not necessarily narrower, but thinner. So I did put the other watch onto it, but it feels like it could kind of tear compared to the original one. Therefore, I still have been using the original one, even though that continues to kind of look more and more like it was used for many months. Now, the second straps I used were these flexible ones. The big advantage or the big downside, so the big downside to this is skin irritations due to the rubber, and also it takes a little bit of time to take them off. So if you are in the shower and you want to take the watch off in order to get your wrist washed, not washed, but washed, and also maybe to wash this a little bit, which I do once a day when I'm showering, then, well, this takes a little bit of time to get it off. And also if you then 2 times additionally have to get it off for charging, so I usually charge both devices 2 times a day, then it takes a little bit of time. So the better option would be a flexible band. So now with this band you have this locking mechanism in between, and so I have this mounted in a way that I pull this usually towards me, not into the other direction, because my arm is able to pull things easier towards me. So if I now move this basically into this direction, then I can take the watch off, and it takes a little bit less time. Now, because it takes less time for me, it probably also takes less time for somebody else. So again, this might be the better option if you are going traveling and you don't want your watch to get stolen in a train, let's say. Now, maybe the thieves already, or the pickpockets already figured out how this works and also how this works, and it doesn't make that much of a difference. But again, increasing basically the threshold for how hard it is or how easy it is to steal a watch might then alter the likelihood of it getting stolen. Now, this one has the big upside that it is flexible. The big downside is that it is also maybe sometimes a little bit too flexible. So while this kind of stays in place, now the holes eventually kind of wear out, and then as they stretch more and more, you might need the next hole, and then the next hole might not fit. So this is kind of a step function, one could say, whereas this is continuous. You can kind of get just the next tightness level by just continuously adapting it. Now, because they are flexible, also over time, and because the band is also not that thick, this means sometimes, and especially if you then have these straps on for multiple months and you're using the same straps, what I found is that when I'm sprinting especially, that then the watch goes kind of up and down, and this is probably not the best in terms of recording your pulse rate accurately, and it also is a feeling that is not that nice because you might lose the watch and it just doesn't feel that secure. So I was not able to reproduce this. Something else that is happening, because this is not that tight, is that if you wear this for maybe a couple of hours, for example, and you are moving a lot, then this usually loosens up, and it loosens up, and it loosens up. So then I found myself eventually for maybe 10 to 15 times a day just adjusting this, and then adjusting it again, and during the workout in the gym I needed to adjust this again, and I found myself constantly basically adjusting. Maybe 10 times during the workout, 5 times during the workout, on a run maybe more, and on a run it's also hard because, well, you're trying to run like this, and then you're having to... So this was a constant issue, so I eventually decided to again switch to these. Now, the upside of these, very flexible in terms of how you get them off, and so it's easier for washing and also charging. Now I tried to find maybe a middle ground, and so I recently got these straps. Now what these straps promise is that they would be a little bit thicker, so it would be kind of a compromise between these two straps, and they do have a different mechanism. So this different mechanism is a magnet. So this magnet has the other magnet here, and then you get the watch on, and so basically you can have the watch, the strap maximally like this, and then you pull this, and then you attach it to the magnet. I found that this position is better because if I'm typing, then I don't want the metal here to be on this side, because I usually have my hands more like this compared to this. So then this is not so much in the way. Because this is now double on this side, and because the band is thicker, this also means you have quite a little bit of something around your wrist here. Now, one problem of getting this here compared to the other ones is that on the Garmin watch this did not fit in. So because this has this very particular design, so this actually fits kind of into this here. So it is kind of this shape here, and so I had to, with sandpaper and also with other tools, basically remove this part of the plastic and actually then get this in. So I also had this this was quite a little bit of a risk, because if I did mess the strap up, then I could no longer use it for this watch, because now it was kind of messed up, but maybe also not for this watch, so then I would have lost maybe a couple of euros. So, and also I maybe then did not want to buy this again, and so I eventually got it right, and I think it also looks somewhat reasonable. It does not look, so if you don't look close, it doesn't look as if it was homemade. So now these straps are quite secure. There is also the question of where you position your watch. So this could be either here, but then because these watches are comparably big, so if you just have something like a Whoop or something like an old Casio watch, then this would be small, and this would maybe fit in here. This is also maybe a question of body composition. So the higher in body fat, the less you are probably likely to use this area, and the more you have probably to switch to this area. Now there is also, in terms of look, this also looks a little bit different. Another factor is, so the arm is just a little bit longer, or looks longer if you have the watch here, compared to if you have the watch here, then the arm just looks shorter, and kind of this muscle here looks thicker. So your underarm looks kind of thicker, similarly to how you pull up the socks, and then your calves might look thicker. Now, if I have this watch here, this watch also has basically solar intensity measuring. So I try to measure my light exposure to skin and eyes, or at least approximate it with Garmin solar intensity. And so especially in winter, if I have a sleeve on here and I have the watch in this position, then I found that if I have it covered, then it doesn't measure solar intensity. So I ideally want this position here, but then because the watches are somewhat thick, if I'm doing any kind of handiwork or also just cooking, for example, or getting into my toolbox, then I often find that this is just in the way if it is here, whereas here it is kind of more out of the way, because then, well, if I have this angle here, and this angle here has basically, it is kind of like this linear thing, I don't know the proper word for it, but here it is less of an issue compared to here, because this is kind of this triangular thing here. So therefore having it like this makes more sense, but only in summer, but because then in winter I usually try to have the watch exposed to sunlight, as then it properly approximates basically my sunlight exposure better. Now, in terms of the tightness, this is now a little bit tighter. It also has this different look with this here, instead of having the more simple look. But if I have it in this position, I find that if I'm running, so first of all, because now it is a flexible strap, there is also kind of the risk of having this move a little bit more. In terms of accessing the watch, so I have the Garmin watch on the left and this on the right, which means that I usually access these buttons here. I found that in this position it is actually easier to kind of have you kind of access these buttons compared to this position, because this position is more flexible, because, well, sometimes I might have the hand here, sometimes here, sometimes here, whereas this position is more stable because it's always kind of attached to the arm, and there is the wrist, so I don't have the wrist as an additional variable that determines basically the positioning of the watch, which means that it is kind of easier, but also it is more of a way, because, well, here it would be easier for me to access it because, well, my arms are to a certain extent apart by the shoulders, and so it is more of a movement to move here compared to here. So it would be even more movement if I had the watch here, for example. So I found on the last run on a Sunday, so basically yesterday, that it wobbles a little bit. And if I don't want it to wobble, especially also the Galaxy Watch, which I didn't have that tight, then I have to have it so tight that I feel somewhat constrained by this. I did have in the past the same feeling with gloves, so I did have gloves over here, and if they have a certain tightness, it feels like this uncomfortable constraint. Whereas if I have it on here, I think it doesn't so much basically constrain probably my blood vessels that much. And so I have less of this feeling, whereas it just feels uncomfortable around here. So if I have it so tight that actually the watch doesn't wobble that much, then this is kind of causing this constrained feeling, which might be kind of a downside to this strap here. So maybe this is the solution. In terms of getting it off, so this is how long it takes. You have this thing which you can put your fingernail in, and if you do this, then you can take this off like this, and then you can charge it. So this is quite a useful thing, but the easier it is for me to take the watch off, the easier it is also for somebody who wants to potentially steal the watch. And also, as I recently was swimming in the river after running, I also didn't feel quite as comfortable. So what if something hits me like this, or I am hitting a rock, or when I'm climbing, for example, and this opens up, and then the watch is basically gone as soon as it gets off of my wrist. And I do not want to lose the watch, and so maybe I take the skin irritations from the other strap.